My name is Emma, I'm 27 years old, and for most of my life I've lived under the heavy shadow of my mother's words. If you've ever been told you're worthless by the one person who's supposed to love you unconditionally, then you'll understand the kind of scars I carry. My mom never saw me as enough. Not smart enough, not pretty enough, not ambitious enough. Every achievement I had was either ignored or picked apart until I felt like it wasn't worth anything. I remember being 14 and bringing home an art project that had won first place at a local fair. I was glowing with pride, thinking maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment she smiled and said she was proud of me. Instead, she barely glanced at it and muttered, "Art won't pay the bills, Emma. Don't waste your time." That was her way. No matter what I did, she found a way to dismiss it. As I grew older, her words didn't sting any less, but I learned to wear a mask. To her, I looked like the daughter who couldn't get her life together. But behind the scenes, I worked hard, studied late nights, and pushed myself forward. I wasn't about to let her version of me become my reality. When I finally landed a job at a prestigious firm downtown, a job I fought tooth and nail to get, I thought maybe this could be the turning point between us. So, naively, I invited her to celebrate with me. I called her, my heart beating fast, and said, "Mom, I got the job. I want you to come out to dinner with me, my treat." Her response cut deeper than any knife. "Why would I celebrate? You'll always be a nobody, Emma." I laughed it off on the phone, but when I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the wall. That was the moment I decided, if she wanted to call me a nobody, then I'd show her just how wrong she was. And a week later, sitting in my brand new office overlooking the skyline, I snapped a photo of the view and sent it to her with no explanation. Within minutes, my phone started buzzing with her name flashing on the screen. Call after call after call. For the first time in years, the panic wasn't mine, it was hers. When the first call came in, I just stared at the screen. My mother's name glowed back at me, and I could almost hear her sharp voice in my head, the one that always seemed so sure of itself. But this time, I didn't pick up. I wanted her to feel that silence. I wanted her to sit in the uncertainty of what that picture meant. By the fourth call in a row, I finally pressed decline and put my phone face down on my desk. I leaned back in my chair, my eyes fixed on the city skyline through the glass. The office was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner, and for once, I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. It took me back to all those years she had dismissed me. When I was 17, I told her I wanted to study business. She had scoffed, saying, "Emma, you're not cut out for that. You don't have the brains for numbers or the charm for leadership. You'll quit halfway, like you always do." But I hadn't quit. I worked 2 part-time jobs to pay for college, studied while my roommates were out partying, and graduated with honors. My mother didn't come to the ceremony. Instead, she sent a text, "Don't let it go to your head. Degrees don't guarantee anything." Her doubt had been my fuel for years, though I didn't admit it to anyone. Now, sitting in an office high above the streets she never believed I'd rise above, I realized I wasn't just proving her wrong, I was rewriting the story of who I was. After ignoring 10 missed calls, I finally picked up when she tried again. Her voice was tight, almost frantic. "Emma, what is this? Where are you? What did you send me?" I let her words hang in the air for a moment before answering, my tone calm but deliberate. "That's my office view, Mom. From my new job. The job you said I'd never get." There was silence on the other end. For once, she had no sharp retort, no insult ready. Just silence. And that silence told me I had finally struck a chord. But this was only the beginning. I wasn't interested in just proving her wrong, I wanted her to feel the weight of every cruel word she had thrown at me. This was where my revenge would start. That silence on the other end of the phone was like oxygen to me. For the first time in my life, my mom didn't have something cruel locked and loaded. She was caught off guard, and I savored it. "Emma," she finally said, her voice shaky. "That can't be your office." "Whose office is that?" Don't play games with me. Her doubt came out of habit, but it no longer pierced me the way it once did. I smiled to myself, leaning back in the leather chair that still smelled brand new. It's mine, Mom. Downtown. 18th floor. Executive level. Remember when you said I'd never even land an interview? Turns out you were wrong. Her breathing quickened, and then she muttered something I'll never forget. You don't belong there. I didn't even respond. I just ended the call, letting her stew in the image of me sitting in a place she had sworn I'd never reach. That night, lying in bed, I thought back over the years and felt something burning inside me. Revenge. Not the kind with shouting matches or slammed doors. I'd had enough of those. No, I wanted my revenge to be quiet, deliberate, undeniable. I wanted her to choke on the reality of my success every time she opened her mouth to insult me. So I started making a plan. Step 1 was simple: keep her in the dark. I wouldn't give her the details of my new job right away. Instead, I'd drip-feed her pieces, photos, subtle comments, things that would keep her guessing. The less she knew, the more her imagination would work against her. Step 2: build a life so visibly successful that she couldn't possibly spin it into failure. That meant not only excelling at work but also making sure she saw me thrive. New wardrobe, new apartment, new confidence. Everything she said I'd never have, I would parade right in front of her eyes. And step 3, that would take patience. Step 3 was making her realize, on her own, that she had been wrong about me my entire life. I didn't just want to tell her. I wanted her to feel it, deeply, painfully, in a way that would haunt her every time she thought of me. I drifted off to sleep that night with a smile on my face. For once, I wasn't the insecure little girl begging for her approval. I was the woman in control, holding all the cards. And I was just getting started. The next morning, I woke up with a fire in my chest. My plan wasn't just some late-night fantasy anymore. I was going to make it real. If my mom wanted to see me as a failure, then I'd make her watch me succeed in ways she could never deny. My first move was upgrading my appearance. For years, I had shied away from investing in myself. I wore cheap clothes, avoided salons, and lived as quietly as possible, half because of money, half because of her voice in my head telling me I didn't deserve better. But now, with my first paycheck on the horizon and a little savings tucked away, I went shopping. I bought a sleek navy suit, a crisp white blouse, and heels that clicked confidently against the sidewalk. I sat in a salon chair for the first time in years and told the stylist, "Make me look like someone who belongs on the 18th floor." When she spun me around at the end, I barely recognized myself. My reflection looked powerful. In control. Exactly what I needed. The following week, I posted a photo on Facebook, something I rarely did. Just me, smiling at my desk with the city skyline behind me. No caption, just the picture. Within hours, I saw the comments roll in, friends from college congratulating me, old acquaintances saying they always knew I'd make it, even coworkers liking it. And then, there it was. A single comment from my mom: "Interesting. Where exactly do you work now, Emma?" I didn't respond. Instead, I let the silence do the talking, just like I had on the phone. She wanted answers, but she wasn't going to get them from me. Not yet. A few days later, she called again. This time, her tone wasn't cold, it was edged with something else. Curiosity. Maybe even fear. "So, this new job. What do you even do there? Who would hire you for something like that?" I kept my voice calm and casual. "Oh, you know. Big clients, lots of responsibility. The kind of role where people actually respect me." Her sharp inhale told me everything I needed to know. She didn't like that answer, but she had no way to cut me down. Not anymore. That was the first visible crack in her armor, and I knew then that my plan was working. She was starting to realize the daughter she had always called a failure was someone she couldn't control anymore. And I was only going to push her further. The promotion came faster than I expected, barely 3 months into my new job, my boss called me into his office and offered me a leadership role on a major account. I walked out of that meeting with my heart racing and the kind of grin I used to envy on other people. For the first time in my life, success felt tangible. And I knew exactly how I'd use it. I signed the lease on a new apartment that very week. Nothing extravagant, just a modern one-bedroom in a high-rise building downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. It was the kind of place my mom always said I'd never have. "Girls like you don't end up in places like that, Emma," she used to say, almost with satisfaction, as if she enjoyed clipping my wings. So the day I moved in, I took a picture of the view from my balcony, city lights stretching for miles, the skyline glowing at sunset. I sent it to her with 3 words, "My new home." It didn't take long for her to call. "A new apartment? You can't afford that, Emma," she snapped, her voice rising with every word. "You're going to get evicted in 3 months. That's how this will end. You always reach too high." I leaned against my new granite countertop, smiling to myself. "Funny, Mom. My rent's already covered for the next year. Don't worry about me." There was silence on the other end. Not because she believed me, oh no, she didn't. It was because she was realizing that her words didn't control me anymore. She couldn't scare me out of my own success. I hung up before she could say anything else. That night, I hosted a small gathering with a few close friends from work. We laughed, toasted champagne, and filled the space with warmth and life. For once, I didn't feel like the girl from my mom's stories, the failure, the nobody. I felt like the woman I had fought to become. But the best part? I knew my mom was stewing. She was imagining me in that apartment, imagining me climbing higher while she stood stuck in her own bitterness. And I wasn't done feeding that fire. It was late October when the recognition came. I was sitting at my desk, typing away on a proposal, when my boss stopped by and dropped a glossy company newsletter in front of me. "Thought you'd want to see this," he said with a smile before walking off. There, on the second page, was a feature about our firm landing a huge client, and my name was printed right beneath the headline, "Emma, leading the way on our biggest account yet." I stared at it for a long moment, my chest tight with a mix of pride and disbelief. My name, in print. My work, acknowledged publicly. This wasn't something my mom could brush aside with her usual comments about me being lucky or overreaching. This was solid proof. That night, after everyone else had left, I took a picture of the article and posted it on LinkedIn. The responses poured in, congratulations from colleagues, kind messages from old professors, even a few recruiters sliding into my inbox. I didn't tag my mom, of course, but I knew she'd see it eventually. She had a habit of snooping, even though she pretended not to care about my life. Sure enough, 2 days later, my phone rang. Her number again. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. "I saw that article," she said immediately, her voice clipped. "Since when do they write about you in company newsletters?" "Since I started doing work worth writing about," I replied coolly. Her sharp laugh was forced. "Don't get too comfortable. These things don't last. One mistake, Emma, and they'll drop you just like that." I almost thanked her in that moment. Because every bitter word she spoke only fueled me more. Instead, I kept my voice calm and steady. "You've been saying that my whole life, Mom. And yet, here I am." There was silence again, her favorite weapon, now turned against her. I could almost feel her unraveling on the other end. After I hung up, I leaned back in my chair and let the satisfaction wash over me. For years, I had craved her approval. But now, I didn't need it. Her disapproval had become my greatest motivator. And the deeper my success rooted itself into the world, my job, my apartment, my recognition, the less power she had left. But I wasn't just going to stop at making her uncomfortable. I wanted her to see me thrive so brightly that it blinded her. And soon, she'd have no choice but to face it. By the time November rolled around, I knew my next move. It wasn't enough for my mom to hear about my success or see glimpses of it online. I wanted her to stand in it, to feel it all around her, so she couldn't deny it anymore. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I invited her over. I sent her a short, polite text, having a little dinner at my new apartment this weekend. You should come. For 10 minutes, there was no reply. Then, finally, why? I stared at the word on my screen, and it almost made me laugh. Why? Because she had spent my whole life telling me I'd never have anything worth showing off. And now I did. Because you're my mother, I typed back. And I thought you might want to see where I live. She didn't confirm right away. But on Saturday evening, just as my friends and co-workers were arriving with bottles of wine and trays of food, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, she stood there in her usual cardigan and pressed slacks, her eyes scanning the sleek apartment behind me. For once, she didn't say anything immediately. Her silence was louder than words. Come in, I said, stepping aside. She walked in slowly, her gaze moving over the polished wood floors, the modern furniture, the city view pouring in through the windows. My friends were laughing near the kitchen island, music was playing softly in the background, and the room radiated the kind of warmth she had never given me growing up. This is yours? She asked finally, her voice tight. All mine, I said with a smile. Every bit of it. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She wanted to find something to criticize, anything, but the words wouldn't come. For the first time in my life, I watched her struggle to diminish me. All evening, she sat quietly in the corner while my friends and coworkers talked about the projects I was leading, the clients I had landed, the recognition I'd earned. I didn't brag. I didn't need to. The truth was shining all around her, and she couldn't escape it. And when she finally left that night, I caught the look in her eyes, not pride, not happiness for me, but something else. Something that looked a lot like regret. For the first time, the power had shifted. And I wasn't about to let it go. After that dinner, something changed in my mom. She didn't say it out loud, she never would, but I could see it in the way she looked at me. The certainty she always carried, the confidence in her insults, it wasn't there anymore. She started calling more often, not to berate me, but to check in. At first, it caught me off guard. How's work? She'd ask casually, as if she hadn't spent years telling me I'd never hold a real job. Or she'd mention how busy she was, then slip in a quick, sounds like you must be busy too, with all those clients of yours. It was strange. Almost desperate. One afternoon, I met her for coffee, mostly out of curiosity. She arrived early, which was unusual for her, and when I walked in wearing a fitted blazer and heels, I noticed the way her eyes lingered on me, like she was seeing me for the first time. So, she said, stirring her coffee slowly, you must be making good money now. I tilted my head, studying her. Why do you ask? She gave a quick, forced laugh. I'm just saying, you're doing well for yourself. I didn't expect it, that's all. There it was. The closest thing to an admission I'd ever get. But instead of feeling satisfied, I felt something else, power. For the first time, I realized she needed me. Not the other way around. And I decided to use that. I didn't flaunt everything at once. Instead, I gave her little pieces, mentioning a project here, casually referencing a bonus there. Each detail was carefully chosen to make her wonder just how far I had gone beyond the limits she'd set for me. The more I fed her, the more unsettled she became. She stopped mocking me and started second-guessing herself. When I told her I had been invited to a corporate gala, she actually paused before saying, "That's impressive." Impressive. From her. It wasn't an apology, but it was close. And it made me realize just how much I could bend this dynamic now. For years, she had held control over me with her words. Now, I was holding control over her with my silence, my success, and my refusal to give her the satisfaction of my validation. But the real revenge wasn't just in making her eat her words, it would be in making her live with the knowledge that she had been wrong about me all along. And I was about to make sure she felt that truth every single day. The invitation came in a thick white envelope embossed with gold lettering. At first, I thought it was just another company memo, but when I slid it open, my heart skipped a beat. I had been invited to the Downtown Business Leadership Gala. Black tie, exclusive, the kind of event I used to imagine important people going to while I sat in my tiny apartment, wondering if I'd ever amount to anything. Now, I wasn't just attending, I was on the guest list as one of the emerging leaders in the city. The first thing I did was buy a dress. Not just any dress, an elegant, floor-length gown that fit like it was made for me. When I stood in front of the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked like someone who belonged in those rooms, someone who wasn't afraid of being seen anymore. The second thing I did was make sure my mom knew about it. I called her, keeping my tone casual. "Hey, I'm going to a gala this weekend. Big networking event." They put me down as one of the city's emerging leaders. There was silence on the other end, long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. Finally, she spoke. "You? They chose you for that?" "Yes," I said, my voice calm but steady. "Me?" She tried to recover, but I could hear the crack in her voice. "Well, I suppose that's something." Something. That was all she could manage. The night of the gala, I didn't take her with me, of course. But I made sure she saw the photos. I had a coworker snap a few shots of me on the red carpet backdrop, smiling confidently, shaking hands with executives, raising a glass under the chandeliers. The next morning, I posted them online with the caption, "An incredible night surrounded by inspiring leaders." It didn't take long before I saw her name pop up in the "Viewed Your Profile" list. She didn't comment, didn't like the photos, but she saw them. And that was enough. Later that evening, she texted me, "You look nice. Didn't expect to see you at something like that." That was the closest she had ever come to giving me a compliment. And though it was faint and begrudging, it felt like victory. But deep down, I knew this was only the surface. If I wanted her to truly face everything she had done, to fully understand how wrong she'd been, I had to go further. And I already knew exactly how. The gala photos had left their mark. I could tell because, for the first time in my life, my mom reached out to me without some hidden jab attached. She called a few days later, her tone softer than I'd ever heard it. "So, how was that big event? Did you meet anyone important?" I leaned back in my office chair, staring out at the skyline. "It was great. I connected with a few executives from major firms. Could open some doors." She hesitated. "That's good. Really good." The words sounded awkward coming from her, like they were fighting to escape her throat. She wasn't used to acknowledging my success, and it showed. But instead of giving her reassurance or basking in her half-hearted praise, I kept my answers short, letting her stew in the fact that I didn't need her approval anymore. And that's when it hit me, this was my true revenge. Not humiliating her in front of others, not shouting back at her like I had always dreamed of doing, but letting her feel, day by day, that her power over me was gone. She had built her identity around tearing me down. Without that, who was she? The shift became even clearer when she asked if we could meet for lunch. Normally, it was me chasing her attention, begging for scraps of affection. Now, she was the one asking for my time. We met at a little cafe near my office. I arrived a few minutes late on purpose, just to remind her that I was no longer at her mercy. When I walked in, I saw her already seated, fiddling with her coffee cup. "You look different," she said when I sat down. "More confident." I smiled. That's what happens when you stop listening to people who call you a nobody. Her face tightened, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she looked down, almost ashamed. Almost. In that moment, I realized she was finally starting to understand. Not just that I had succeeded, but that she had been wrong about me my entire life. And the beauty of it was, I didn't have to raise my voice or throw it in her face. I just had to live my life, and let her watch. That was the revenge. Quiet, steady, undeniable. And I wasn't done yet. The opportunity came in December, when my old high school invited me to speak at a career day event. At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back. That place held too many memories of me walking the halls with my head down, hearing whispers about how I'd never make it because I wasn't good enough at sports or popular enough to fit in. But then I realized something: this was my chance. Not just to inspire students, but to show the very community my mom had always cared about, her neighbors, her friends, the other parents, what I had become. I accepted the invitation without hesitation. The day of the event, I wore a tailored suit and walked into the gymnasium with a confidence I never had as a teenager. Rows of students sat on the bleachers, their eyes on me, waiting to hear my story. I spoke about resilience, about pushing forward even when the people closest to you don't believe in you. I didn't name names, but the meaning was clear to me. Afterward, I shook hands with a few teachers and parents who had attended. Some of them even remembered me. "Emma? You're the one who used to do those art projects, right? Look at you now." But the moment that struck me most came later that evening, when my mom called. Her voice was tight, almost strangled. "I heard about your little talk at the school today," she said. "Mrs. Green told me you were wonderful. She said you were inspiring." The words seemed to taste bitter on her tongue. I let the silence stretch for a moment, then said simply, "That's nice of her to say." She exhaled sharply, as if she had more to say but couldn't bring herself to say it. And that's when it hit me: this was exactly what I had wanted. Not only was she watching me succeed, but now she had to listen to other people praise me, the very people whose opinions she had always cared about more than mine. For once, she couldn't twist the narrative. The world was seeing me for who I really was, and she couldn't take that away. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine in my apartment and sat by the window, looking out over the city lights. I had dreamed of this kind of victory for so long, and now it was unfolding in front of me. But there was still one final piece missing, something that would seal it all, once and for all. And I knew exactly what it was. The final piece came sooner than I expected. In January, my boss pulled me aside after a meeting and said, "Emma, we're putting you up for an award. Citywide recognition, Young Professional of the Year. You've earned it." I nodded calmly, but inside, my heart was racing. This was it, the biggest stage yet. The ceremony would be formal, with executives, city officials, and press in attendance. My boss encouraged me to invite family. For a brief moment, I thought about saying no. My mom didn't deserve to share in this moment after everything she'd done. But then I realized, this wasn't about her sharing it. This was about her being forced to see it. So I mailed her an invitation. No note, no explanation. Just the glossy card announcing my nomination, with my name printed in bold. The night of the ceremony, I walked into the grand ballroom in a deep emerald dress that turned heads. The chandeliers glistened, the air buzzed with chatter, and I felt more at home than I ever had in my life. When I spotted her across the room, standing awkwardly near the back, clutching her purse like a lifeline, I almost laughed. She looked out of place, small, the way I had always felt under her gaze. When my name was called, the applause filled the room, and I walked up to the stage. My mom's face was pale, her eyes fixed on me as I accepted the award, shook hands, and turned to the crowd with a smile. "Thank you," I began. "This award isn't just about me, it's about proving that no matter what others say about you, no matter how many times you're told you'll never make it, you can rise. You can build the life you were told you didn't deserve." I didn't look directly at her, but I didn't need to. The words were for her, and we both knew it. Afterward, people surrounded me with congratulations. Cameras flashed. My boss introduced me to executives who wanted to work with me. And through it all, my mom stood off to the side, watching me shine in a world she never believed I belonged in. Later, as the crowd began to thin, she approached me. Her voice was low, shaky. "Emma. I didn't know. I didn't know you could," she trailed off, unable to finish. I smiled politely, my award gleaming in my hands. You didn't want to know, Mom. That's the difference. Her eyes filled with something I had never seen before, not anger, not superiority. Regret. And that was worth more than any apology she could ever give me. After the awards ceremony, things between my mom and me shifted permanently. She couldn't deny who I was anymore, not when the city itself had recognized me, not when she had stood in that room and watched people applaud the daughter she had called a nobody. But if I thought that moment alone would change her, I was wrong. Old habits die hard. A week later, she called me, her voice softer than usual but still carrying that edge. Emma, I just don't want you to get too comfortable. Success like this doesn't always last. I almost laughed. Even now, she couldn't help herself. But instead of snapping back or hanging up, I took a deep breath and said what I should have said years ago. Mom, you don't get to talk to me like that anymore. She went quiet. What do you mean? I mean, I said firmly, I've spent my whole life listening to you tear me down. I don't need it anymore. I don't owe you my time if all you're going to do is try to clip my wings. From now on, I decide how much space you get in my life. Her silence stretched long over the line, but I didn't rush to fill it. For once, I let her sit in the weight of my words. Finally, she spoke, her voice shaky. You'd cut your own mother out of your life? I'd cut anyone out who doesn't respect me, I replied evenly. Even you. For the first time, I heard fear in her tone. Not the kind of fear that came from anger, but the kind that came from realizing she no longer had control. From that day on, I set boundaries. If she called to criticize, I ended the conversation. If she tried to downplay my achievements, I corrected her once and moved on. I didn't beg for her approval, and I didn't let her opinions define me. And slowly, I noticed something I never expected. Her attitude started to change. She still struggled, of course. Old patterns lingered. But every so often, I'd catch a glimpse of something different. A softer tone. A comment that wasn't laced with bitterness. A hesitation before saying the kinds of things she once threw at me freely. She was learning, in her own way, that the daughter she used to control was gone. I had taken my power back. And I wasn't giving it up again. It was late February when the unexpected happened. My phone buzzed one evening, and when I saw my mom's name on the screen, I hesitated. Normally, I would have braced myself for some passive-aggressive remark or thinly veiled criticism. But something in me felt different this time. I wasn't afraid of her words anymore. I answered. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. Emma, can I come over? I almost said no. Every part of me wanted to protect the peace I had built, but something told me this wasn't one of her usual calls. Sure, I said finally. When she arrived, she looked smaller somehow, like the sharp edges she had always worn had dulled. She sat on my couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap, staring at the floor instead of at me. After a long silence, she said, I owe you something. I didn't speak. I just waited. Her voice trembled as she went on. All those years. I told you that you were a failure. I said things I shouldn't have. I thought if I was hard on you, you'd push yourself. But I went too far. Way too far. I felt my throat tighten, but I stayed quiet. She looked up at me then, her eyes glassy. You're not a nobody, Emma. You never were. I see that now. It wasn't a perfect apology. It wasn't the tearful, sweeping confession I might have dreamed of when I was younger. But it was the closest thing she could give me, and for the first time, I believed it came from a real place. Still, I didn't rush to forgive. I had worked too hard, fought too many battles, to let one moment erase years of pain. Mom, I said carefully, I appreciate you saying that. But you need to understand, words have consequences. You don't get to undo everything overnight. She nodded slowly, her shoulders sagging. I know. I don't want to lose you. And that was when it truly hit me. For years, I had been terrified of losing her, of not being good enough, of being abandoned. But now, the roles had reversed. She was the one afraid of losing me. That was my victory. Not the award, not the apartment, not even the gala. It was this moment, finally knowing she needed me more than I needed her. And I had the power to decide what came next. For weeks after that night, I thought about her words. The apology, or as close as she could manage, echoed in my mind. I had spent years craving it, and now that I had it, I realized something I never expected: I didn't need it anymore. Because the truth was, I had already built my life without her approval. The apartment, the career, the recognition, all of it was mine because I chose to believe in myself when she wouldn't. The apology was just the final confirmation that I had won. Still, I didn't want revenge to be the only ending. I wanted peace. Not for her, she had to live with her regrets, but for myself. Carrying bitterness forever would only keep me tied to her shadow, and I was finally free of that. So I set my terms. One Sunday afternoon, I invited her back to my apartment. She sat across from me at the table, her hands clutching a mug of tea like it was an anchor. "Mom," I said calmly, "I'm willing to have you in my life. But it has to be on my terms. That means no more insults, no more tearing me down. If you can't treat me with respect, I won't answer your calls. Do you understand?" She nodded, her eyes downcast. I understand. It wasn't perfect, and I didn't expect her to change overnight. But in that moment, I knew I had drawn a line in the sand. For the first time in my life, I was the one setting the rules. The weeks that followed were different. She still stumbled sometimes, her old habits slipping through, but she caught herself more often than not. And every so often, she surprised me, with a small compliment, with a softer tone, with a moment of honesty I never thought she was capable of. It wasn't the fairy tale ending of a mother suddenly becoming everything I'd ever wanted. But it was something better, a life where I no longer lived for her approval. Now, when I stand in my office overlooking the skyline, I think back to that first photo I sent her, the one that made her panic. I remember how powerful it felt to flip the script, to finally make her face what she had tried to deny. And I smile. Because my revenge wasn't about hurting her, it was about proving, to both of us, that I was never the failure she said I was. I was always destined to rise. And now, I'm living it,